Episode 97, Enchanted by Someone's Flattery. Did you finish bathing? Ningxi selected 10 outfits in one go. After trying them on, she loved each one of them. In the end, she directly made a big purchase and bought them all. Indeed, the best way to deal with decision paralysis is to have money. Just buy them all, no need to hesitate. Among them, there was a set featuring traditional Chinese ink paintings of flowers, birds, fish, and insects. Ningxi liked it the most. She had the saleswoman pack her own clothes, then she wore this set directly. The saleswoman was full of smiles for this big customer. Thank you for your patronage. Welcome back anytime. Carrying bags of clothes, Ningxi was about to leave when a group of female stars, led by Li Leiling, walked into the store. Surprisingly, the woman in the light green long dress beside Li Leiling was Ning Xuelua. She hadn't seen Ning Xuelua at the Noble Audition location that day. How did she end up in Los Angeles? For a moment, all the sales staff and the store manager hurriedly welcomed them, bowing respectfully towards Ning Xuelua. "Miss, you've arrived." Hearing this, Ningxi furrowed her brows slightly. "Miss?" Because Ningxi was standing at the entrance, all those people saw her the moment they entered. Li Leiling glanced at the bags Ningxi was holding and said with a smirk, "I never thought you'd also like history." Ning Xuelua walked gracefully to Ningxi and said, "Ningxi, I didn't expect you to come. Why didn't you inform me in advance? I could have asked the staff to give you a discount." Ningxi furrowed her brows slightly. The person who acquired Ni Chong was actually Ning Xuelua? As far as Ningxi knew, Ning Xuelua preferred a European and American style of clothing. She always looked down on Ni Chang's clothes, which had Chinese elements, considering them too tacky. How did she suddenly decide to invest in Ni Chong? Ningxi casually replied and then left the store. After Ningxi left, Li Leiling sneered disdainfully, "Wearing dragon robes can't hide the country bumpkin's rural aura." "What do you mean?" a female star asked. Li Leiling raised her eyebrows. "Don't you know? Ningxi is just like Feng Xiaowen, coming out from a mountain village. In the past, she used to herd cattle, raise chickens, and ducks." All the female stars were surprised. "No way? Has Cook gone mad? Why would he choose such a person as the spokesperson for Noble, which has always been known for its nobility? If the buyers find out that the spokesperson is a country bumpkin, who would buy their products? Hee, I don't think Cook is crazy. He's just enchanted by someone's flattery." Ning Xuelua mediated, "Alright, today, we came here to buy clothes. Don't discuss business matters. By the way, Xuelua, can we really have the designer design a gown for each of us?" a small star asked excitedly. Li Leiling immediately proudly declared, "Of course. Xuelua is the owner of history. It's a piece of cake for her." Most of the people present were influential figures in the industry. Although history was popular, it was just the icing on the cake for them. Ning Xuelua timely added, "Ladies, wearing clothes from history is an honor for us. I also want to thank you for saving me advertising costs." With this statement, the faces of those female stars improved. One of the higher-ranked figures spoke, "Xuelua, you're too modest. It's true that your brand has strength." After leaving history, Ningxi strolled around the streets, planning to buy some gifts to take back. Feeling a bit tired, she bought some snacks and drinks and found a bench to sit down and rest for a while. While she was eating, she suddenly felt like someone's gaze was on her. Ningxi looked up and saw a scruffy beggar across the street staring directly at her. Being stared at while eating wasn't a pleasant feeling. Ningxi took out a sandwich from her bag and walked a few steps towards the beggar, handing it to him. The beggar glanced at her, took the sandwich, and started devouring it. After a while, Ningxi felt that she was being stared at again. She lifted her head, and indeed, it was the same beggar. Moreover, this time, Ningxi noticed that although he was looking at her, his focus didn't seem to be on the food in her hand. Instead, he was scrutinizing her with a gaze that resembled a mix of pickiness and displeasure. Ningxi found it puzzling. "Did I offend you? I just gave you food, what's with that look?" Ningxi stopped eating and walked over. "Hey, why are you staring at me?" "I'm not staring at you," unexpectedly, the beggar replied. To Ningxi's surprise, this beggar turned out to be a Chinese man. Ningxi changed her approach. "You say you're not, but you've been staring at me for quite a while, and you're still doing it now." The beggar scrutinized her again and said, "I'm looking at the clothes you're wearing." Ningxi raised her eyebrows, looked down at her dress, and asked, "What's wrong with my clothes?" The beggar answered without much thought, "Ugly." Ningxi was speechless. This person obviously had no sense of fashion, so how could he think this dress was ugly? Then tell me, what's wrong with this dress? Ningxi only casually asked, thinking he might say it's too flashy or something. Unexpectedly, the beggar began, the embroidery on your dress comes from Lin Fengmian's painting rest. The painting is good, but the base color shouldn't be so dark. The most suitable color is sky blue. The material shouldn't be silk, it should be a lighter fabric. The design around the waist is the biggest flaw. It's not about tightening the waist to highlight the figure. If it could be slightly looser here, the effect would be completely different. Ningxi listened with interest. The beggar, who was critiquing her dress, seemed to know what he was talking about. Indeed, following his advice, Ningxi re-evaluated her dress and found his comments quite reasonable. Ningxi stopped in her tracks and listened attentively. Go on. The beggar snorted, the most important point is that your dress is simply an unfinished design. To actually produce and sell such a defective piece is deceiving the consumers. Ningxi's eyes flickered. She stared at the beggar who was passionately critiquing her dress and felt a hint of curiosity. Not to mention that this young man seemed to be in his 20s and looked strong and healthy. He didn't appear to be disabled, so why was he begging on the streets of a foreign country? Upon hearing Ningxi's question, the beggar's body stiffened. While he had been talkative before, he suddenly turned into a closed clam, lying back on the ground, avoiding eye contact. Ningxi touched her chin and decided to leave. After hearing the footsteps of her departure, the beggar opened his eyes. His gaze was still fixed on her clothes and the bags with the history logo. After a moment, he heard footsteps again, pausing in front of him. He casually shook the cup containing spare change, but then heard a thud next to his ear. Opening his eyes, he saw a can of beer in front of him. The beggar immediately sat up, grabbed the beer, and raised his head. To his surprise, the girl from before had returned, and this time, she bought a whole case of beer and placed it at his feet. What does this mean? The beggar asked suspiciously. Cheers, I have alcohol and you have a story. Ningxi found a newspaper to sit on and sat on the ground. The beggar opened the beer can, took a sip, and spoke with a dull tone, I don't have much of a story. Ningxi smiled and didn't rush him. After 10 bottles, she thought, let's see if you still have no story. She rarely interfered with other people's business, but if something caught her interest, she would break through the matter until she got a clear understanding. As a result, it didn't even take 10 bottles. After 3 bottles, the beggar was already tipsy and began rambling on his own. Ningxi shook the beer in her hand and took the opportunity to ask, I'll ask you again now. Why do you know so much about the clothes I'm wearing? How do you even know it's a semi-finished product? I know, of course, I know, it's my child. The beggar said intermittently. Huh? Your child? They stole it, stole my child. What do you mean? Who stole your child? History, they stole my enact. Huh, you still know about enact? Who are you exactly? You say history stole your enact, but isn't the designer for enact Dai Wei? Ningxi became more interested and continued to pour him more alcohol. Come on, drink more. The beggar finished 2 more cans and continued, I am the designer of enact, the only designer. Ningxi raised an eyebrow, you say I should believe you? I could also say I'm an emperor. The beggar's face darkened, believe it or not. Ningxi rolled her eyes, took out her phone, and opened an album. It was filled with photos of her wearing enact. Here, since you claim to be the only designer of enact, now I'll test you. When did I buy these clothes from the market? Which series do they belong to? It should be easy for you, right? The beggar glanced at the clothes in the photos in a daze. His eyes, initially lifeless, suddenly erupted with a dazzling light, but it quickly disappeared like a shooting star. Muttering to himself, he said, beautiful, really beautiful, they found suitable owners. Ningxi nodded in satisfaction. This guy finally said something nice after all. After seeing those photos, the beggar finally showed some signs of life. Opening one of the pictures, he exclaimed excitedly, you have this one too? This is the first spring dress released by the enact studio, titled The Garden of Spring Colors Can't Be Contained. The beggar spoke about a dress with a floral theme. The handmade flowers on the dress looked vivid, as if they would bloom the next second, full of vitality, truly living up to the name The Garden of Spring Colors Can't Be Contained. That's natural, I'm a loyal fan of enact, Ningxi said proudly. At the same time, she was already 70 to 80% convinced by the beggar's words. Just by looking at his eyes while he examined the photos, it was truly the gaze of a mother looking at her child. Sure enough, the beggar continued to talk about the release dates and themes of each outfit, even sharing the original intentions and little stories behind the designs. As he spoke, he ended up lying on the ground, tears streaming down his face while holding Ningxi's phone. My Chang. Ningxi squatted beside the beggar, patting his shoulder. Brother, what exactly happened? Clearly, it's your design, so why did the designer end up being Dai Wei? Perhaps because he had suppressed it for too long, the man finally began to speak intermittently. Dai Wei, he's my partner, my college buddy whom I've known since university. Our relationship has always been great. I considered him my best brother, the most trustworthy partner. Starting from university, we ventured into business together, establishing our own studio. I was better at design, and he excelled in operations. So, we collaborated. I focused on designing works, and he managed everything related to the products. Because I trusted him, I never questioned the situation of the studio. Who knew, in the end, he stole all the design drafts from my computer, took away all the money from the studio, and kicked me out. Then, he found investors and established a new brand. Hearing this, Ningxi finally understood. Is that brand history? Yes. Haven't you thought about suing him? Heh, sue him? How do I sue him? Clothes don't have the designer's name engraved on them. The only person who knows that I'm the designer for Ni Chang is him. He is also a design major himself, and his style is very close to mine. He destroyed all the data on the computer, and there's no evidence to prove that those design drafts were completed by me. The man had a look of despair. Ningxi thought for a moment and then asked, how many design drafts did he steal from you? The man clutched his chest, his face filled with pain, his eyes turning crimson as he said, all of them. All my design drafts. Including the unfinished ones. Ningxi sighed and then pointed to her temple. What about the ones in your head? What? The man was puzzled. The design drafts in your mind, can he steal those too? The man was stunned for a moment and then smiled bitterly. Are you saying I can start afresh? Heh, impossible, impossible, ever since he betrayed me, ever since I saw Ni Chang transform into history. I haven't had any inspiration left in my mind. I know, my life is over. But you still have passion. Can you honestly say you have no interest in design anymore? When you see those beautifully designed clothes, don't you feel anything? Don't deny it, otherwise, you wouldn't be so excited about the flaws in the clothes I'm wearing. Ningxi spoke. The man shook his head. Heh, is passion alone useful? Nowadays, having passion only makes me more miserable. You're right. Passion alone isn't enough, it's a very realistic problem. You also need something very important, money. Are you joking? Look at my current state. Where can I get money? Ningxi blinked and patted her chest. I have some. You? The man looked at her suspiciously. Ningxi lifted the man up and patted his shoulder. Stand up, young man. Your life is just beginning, and your destiny is about to change from this moment on. The man looked at Ningxi with eyes like he was seeing an idiot, then laid back down. Ningxi stood with her hands on her hips, wide-eyed. What's wrong? Don't you believe me? Alright, let me tell you seriously. I really like your designs. You should know that I'm not lying when you see those buyer shows. So, I'm officially inviting you to collaborate. What do you think? Interested? The man's back stiffened. Collaborate? With a beggar? Ningxi chuckled. Yes, I'm just a wealthy and capricious person. How about it? I'm standing in front of you, such a big fat sheep. Are you going to fleece it or not? The man stared at the girl in front of him in a daze. Though she was joking, there was no hint of joking in her eyes. She was serious. Why? He asked. I've already said I'm your fan, but it's also a coincidence. I've recently made some money and planned to invest in a business. Then I ran into you. However, I need to clarify that my funds are not abundant right now. I only have 3 million, and I can invest all of it in you. 3 million? The man murmured. 3 million is not a small amount. When we started the studio, we only had 50,000 in initial capital. Don't complain. Anyway, the most important thing is that you must pull yourself together and have confidence. I'm an actress, and my main focus will still be on my main job. Besides, I'm not professional in fashion design, so you are the soul and core of our studio. The choice of the studio location, recruiting personnel, and future development plans will be up to you. Ningxi analyzed one by one. Listening to Ningxi's plans for the future, the man sat up, somewhat awkwardly straightening his body and said, although I spent most of my time focusing on designing, I'm not completely ignorant of how a studio operates. It might be a bit difficult at the beginning, but I think, if given another chance, I can do it. Ningxi nodded in satisfaction. With you saying that, I can rest assured. Are you really serious? Just because you chatted with me for a few sentences, drank a few cans of beer, and threw so much money on me? The man still wore a completely incredulous expression, almost thinking he was dreaming or having an illusion from drinking too much. Ningxi raised an eyebrow, her face full of boldness and arrogance. Money is something you can earn again. What's the big deal? I like challenges and dangerous things. Ningxi was an assertive person. After the conversation, she directly took the man to a clothing store to buy new clothes, a barber shop for a haircut, and then brought him to a hotel for a bath. Hey, did you finish bathing? Remember to change into the clothes I bought for you. I've already thrown away your ragged outfit. Oh, and shave your beard. Ningxi was waiting outside impatiently. The man finally walked out slowly. Ningxi was holding her phone, playing games with her head down. When she heard footsteps, she absent-mindedly looked up and was dumbfounded.